Hello everybody, Glass Half Dead here. Let's talk about the least played factions in the game. Of course, a big shout out to Kenny Order Crit, who recently did the stats, like the best, the win rate potentials for not just the last month, but also the last kind of quarter, the year, whatever it is. Stats taken from Hot Sauce Teddy, and I took those stats and I said, what's the worst, basically, because to me, in a sense, that is more interesting. So I thought we'd go over that here. Why would we look at this? Good question. I think I've answered that. So I'm a faction hipster, and I'm a meta slave. Okay, so you know when we talk about a meta chaser, we talk about it in the sense of people that want to jump on the latest thing, because in 40k the latest thing is always the most powerful thing. That's not the case in Kill Team, whatever. And we want to look at, and they want to look at what's the strongest for the least amount of input, so that I can win in a tournament. And we call that a meta chaser. I don't know, a few months ago said that's a meta slave because they are a slave to the meta. Well, you know what, guys? And I think some of you are going to be right there with me. I am someone that, even though I don't particularly want to win tournaments and I don't particularly care about doing well in tournaments, I am just as much of a meta slave as them. But we look for different things in what we look at the meta for. I don't know about you guys, but I have a fully painted, ready to go Pathfinder team and Void Dancer team. I have never played either of those teams. Because when they came out, they were too good. Because of the meta told us they were too good. And so, you know what? I never played them. Purely because of their strength in the meta. And that is just as much of a meta slave as someone that will only play them so that they can win. There you go. So I'm a dirty meta chaser. I'm just not chasing the same thing. I'm just not chasing tournament wins. If anything, I'm chasing tournament losses. And I just like that crispy hipsterousness, because I am indeed a faction hipster. That is the only reason I'm doing this. I want to take a look at teams that I can play. Also, if you watch my last video, which was about nerfs and buffs, I also think that we need to look at that, because power levels are going to rise and fall. We can look now and think, is it possible that the least played factions are also the worst performing factions, and therefore factions that we think are going to get a buff? Well, if that's the case, why bother playing them now? Because soon they're going to be the best. Look at Hunterclade. If you were a meta hipster and you started playing Hunterclade because of that, wow, you are not happy right now, because you are a meta chaser. We could also look at, maybe power balance at the end, I don't know, and consider if that's the case. We don't want to play the actual worst teams, we want to play the teams just a little bit above the worst teams, because they aren't going to get touched by the buffs. Okay, tournament versus casual. So obviously all of the stats that I looked at are purely tournament stats. There is no way to know, like, what is actually the most played team when it comes to casual games or anything like that. This is just tournaments. And of course, when people go to a tournament, they're probably taking something that either they know very well and so can perform decently with, or that they believe will win the tournament. That's generally the case, okay? Few people are going to be taking things that deliberately are going to lose, or that they don't know very well and therefore would naturally perform a little bit worse with. Also, as far as I'm aware, as far as I can tell from rumblings and anecdotes on the internet, a lot of people still play the Compendium. But what we're about to look at, there's like 4 Compendium teams played in like the last 6 months. So these are tournament numbers, not casual numbers. Casual is an unknowable black hole. I then note the Kill Team scorecard app. Hold on, let me go full screen for you here, so that I can show you the app. So I've mentioned this app before. It's super cool. It's just this. Oh god, sorry for hitting the microphone. Oh, lovely. It's just an app. You put in your stuff. You start the game. It's got all the stuff you need. You can do stuff. Blah blah blah. The reason I mention this now is because the creator has said that he's thinking, this is only a beta thing. In the future, what he's going to do is have the option to upload your data or store your data a number of games. And so what you might be able to do is go through and actually say, so you can store your casual games. So if you want to go ahead and this will be the only way to find out casual gameplay data. Obviously, it's a bit of a weird definition of casual because you're doing it enough that you want to track it in some manner. But likewise, you can just use this as a scorecard. It doesn't have to be anything else. So hopefully, people will use this purely for ease of play and then also for fun upload their data so we could get a much rounder view of what people are actually playing outside of tournaments. Interesting idea. Also just a useful thing in general. Cool. So with that mentioned, Killteam scorecard app on both Android and iPhone. iPlay? I have an iPhone. I don't know what it's called. App Store? That sounds right. Okay, with that said, with those provisos out of the way, let me go back to, here we go, delightful. I would like to say, I think we all know what's coming. Chaps, the next slide is a subscriber-only slide. Please don't watch it unless you are a subscriber to my channel. Because if you are a subscriber to my channel, I would like to give you a big double hello. Yes, much wholesomeness, guys. Honestly, just have a good time out there. Stay safe, have fun. There's a bunch of stuff you can look at. I have another channel called Full Scale Wargaming. I have a Patreon if you want to support the frivolous activities I perform on this channel. I have merch. Guys, I just wear this merch. I'm not really a clothes guy. You might have noticed that. So I bought my own merch because I felt I had to have it, right? Because it's my merch. I just wear this everywhere now. I don't know if people that see me think I'm doing it to like promote my merch. I'm not. These are just all the clothes I have. I basically just own my own merch and that's it. Cringe? No, but maybe. I also have a Discord, an Advantage Point podcast, which used to be freely available, but now it's a patron-only benefit because I just wanted to chill out a little bit, but we have some awesome content over there. Okay, with that said, let's get into the content, the meat, the gristle, I could think of some more words, I suppose. So obviously, when we're looking at, least played numbers, least played factions out there, you have to look at the Compendium, right? And I'm not against playing Compendium teams. So, but, a few caveats. Really, I did mean, when I was thinking about this, the least played spec team. Because I think it's very clear that if you I just want to play the least played team, just pick something random from the Compendium that sucks. That would be easy. So with that said, let's look at the Compendium briefly and kind of look at the flip side of Compendium. Compendium obviously not played very much when it comes to tournaments, obviously. However, the top Compendium teams are Death Guard, Grey Knights, and Hive Fleet. Then, so those are the top three, and then the next highest one after that, I think, was Talons and Demons. I think who were both played in like 2 tournaments, maybe 3 over the last 6 months, 3 months. Yeah, so there's really not much going on there. They don't get many wins, to be clear, but they are played, all of these factions. I've got to say, personally, I like me some Hive Fleet and some Grey Knights. I don't have my Death Guard. I used to, but I sold them, so those were no. Grey Knights, they don't perform well. They don't perform well, especially with how many Intercession are out there these days. They don't have a great matchup into Intercession. Hive Fleet, I think, are strong. I don't have my Hive Fleet behind me. They're actually all the way back there, right behind me. I like Hive Fleet. I'm really excited for when the spec team for Tyranids will come out. Hive Fleet are a nice, fun, I don't want to say brain dead, but you don't have to think too much with what you're doing with them, and you can still get a good game in. However, shout out here. So obviously there are many, many, many Compendium factions that just don't get taken to tournaments. But some Chad took Space Marines to... there were 7 games total, so that's either 1 7-round tournament or 1 4-round, 1 3-round. Hard to know. There's no delineation there, sadly. And they got 7 games in and had 0 wins. So, That's pretty fun. So they are, Space Marines are the bottom of the actually played Compendium teams. Fun. Crossover numbers. So these are the spec factions with same number of games roughly. You know, we're talking under 2% of the meta sort of thing, as the top Compendium. Oh, just to be clear, all of these guys, Death Guard, Grey Knights, High Fleet, they are all under 2% of games played total, which means teeny tiny. Crossover numbers, so all of these are also under 2% of games played. They actually have more more games in, but percentage-wise, still meaningless, essentially. Which is Elucidian Starstriders, Kassakin, Hyrotech Circle, Farstalker, Kimband. That's the Kroot. Kassakin, Hyrotech Circle, fair enough, right? I mean, you know, Shadow Vaults has only just released. And as far as we can tell, frankly, Kassakin, you know, Shadow Vaults was bought almost exclusively by 40k players that just wanted some early Kassakin. In fact, Hyrotech Circle had more plays, more games in than the Kassakin. So clearly, despite the fact Shadow Vaults sold out incredibly quickly, it seems, it was primarily for 40k players playing Kassakin, or just kill team players that didn't go to the tournament. So that's fine, you know, numbers are what numbers are. No doubt, going forwards, things will be different, and people will learn to play these factions, so win rates will improve, but whatever. Elucidians, so all 4 of these, before I had seen these stats from my last video, got talked about as bad factions that needed buffs. So keep that in mind, because these are probably going to get buffed. Fingers crossed. From what we know about GW, they want to keep all of the factions within a 45 to 55% win rate. All of these are super low. Now, it's possible that Kassakin and Hyrotech Circle are, frankly, too new to get buffs, and I think that is the case. I don't think they're going to get buffs until the next round, but Starstriders, Farstalker should get something. Who knows what, but yeah. So, but either way, I do think the Kassakin and Hyrotech Circle are going to get buffs, just don't know when. So interesting numbers there, interesting numbers. What can we take from that? So interestingly, if you take those four factions, Starstriders, Kassakin, Hyrotech Circle, Farstalker, you swap the Kassakin for Phobos, they are the 4 worst performing factions when it comes to win rates. What does that mean? Do we care? No, we don't. Okay, good. Look, we could have a big long... Let's have a big long talk. No, let's not. Let's keep this concise. So there's an interesting thing. I recall this from, I think, it must have been 8th edition, I suppose, where the Warhammer team talked about their decision to buff or nerf. I remember it was Genestealer cults. I can't remember why exactly where I read this. So maybe I'm making this up and it's all in my head. But, or maybe it was Thousand Suns at the time, or maybe this was 7th edition. Like that's how foggy this memory is. But they specifically said that they believed that this faction, let's just call it GSC, Genestealer cults. They believed that GSC was exactly where they wanted it to be, power rate wise. It was exactly what they wanted. However, the community did not see that, and they couldn't see it, and so they deliberately buffed GSC to be stronger than they felt it should be, and in fact, deliberately overtuned it so that they would get played. Now, whether that's, you know, the online circle jerk on r/Warhammer competitive, whether that's just whatever, that's the answer. The online, you know, the online community very much gets stuck in its ways, very much an echo chamber. And a lot of people don't like to play a faction that they feel they will not be rewarded by playing. And so you could argue that currently, a lot of because we know that Kill Team is, you know, a pretty good skill-based game compared to 40k, it's possible that a lot of people don't want to play these lowest tier factions because the really good people who meta chasers, meta slaves, are there to win tournaments, and these 4 factions are totally fine factions, right? Swapping Kassakin for Phobos are totally fine factions that if a top player took them, they would be able to do totally fine with and come very nicely middle, top half of the tournament, you know, top quarter of plays or position, whatever. However, they also know that if they were to take a better faction, they would then be the top player at that tournament. And of course, that's what they're there to do, be a top player. They care less about proving they can play a bad team well than they care about winning and actual final placements. You know, perhaps, for example, I know that in the really big 40k tournaments, it's very common that they will have a best in faction. And certainly, you know, if we had a 1,000-person kill team tournament, 100%, I think there should be medals for best Causation player, best, you know, Void Dancer player, right? That's a really good way to reward people for playing what they want to play, and also taking into account that, frankly, whoever makes it to the top 4, there is obviously, there's a lot of luck involved in that at some point. However, is it possible that people going to these tournaments are doing the same thing in Kill Team despite skill playing a bigger role than in 40k? Yes. So, how important is power level when it comes to picking your team? I think pretty high, I would guess. And I think we all know the famous saying, correlation does equal causation, so let's just not question that. Also, these 4 teams, 5 teams, possibly, probably going to get buffs. So, with that in mind, when it comes to least played faction and which one we would then want to go forwards and possibly mainline, just stick right in our veins and go for, snort like a line of plastic, we don't want to take those. Instead, we want to look at just above those, okay, just above those 4, we get the Blooded, the Warp Coven, the Wormblade, and the Void Dancers? Crazy! Now this is an interesting twist, isn't it, my chaps? So Void Dancers actually, in this quarter, really not played much. Really not played. Amazingly good win rate, not played much. Now that's really interesting. I know that a lot of the top players are talking about them and saying, yeah, I've figured out how to beat them now. You know, which is cool. But I assume, therefore, they're getting a lot of wins in the lower brackets. But they're, you know, hey, they're good. They are, so Blooded, Warp Coven, Wormblade, not great wins. They're sitting, you know, around the 45 to 50% win rate. So they're not below that. So they're not going to get buffed, but they're not getting much play, and they're not really getting many wins. Void Dance is kind of the opposite. They're not getting many plays, but they're actually winning really well. But perhaps because they're not getting played so much anymore, by, again, the top players have moved on from them a little bit, they are now getting a little bit fewer wins, so they have dropped down nicely to be within the 55% win bracket, and they're not getting many plays. So if I were a meta chaser that both wanted to win and be a faction hipster, Void Dancer are actually the thing to go for. Which is a little bit crazy, I've got to be honest. And I don't like Void Dancers, or I won't do that. And I don't care. Which leaves me with Blooded, Warp Coven, and Wormblade. Interesting stuff. Blooded have never spoken to me hugely. But you know what? I will say, recently I saw someone do a very delightful yellow colour scheme Blooded. You know I love me some yellow. It just sparks with my eyes. It's really nice. That did entice me not only to consider doing a yellow Imperial Guard team, but also a yellow Blooded team. So who knows? But I won't be doing that. I don't have time. Warp Coven and Wormblade. Now for both of these, I have all the models. I have all the models for all of this, sorry. But yeah, interesting. I've played Warp Coven recently. Didn't do very well. I think there's a lot more for me to do there. I think Warp Coven are a really interesting team. They haven't performed well ever, from what I recall. Like, straight out of the gate, they were a little bit confusing for people. A lot of different options, a lot of places to go wrong. They've never done well. I don't think really that a top player has ever like mained them and like done consistently well and then come out onto a Discord or a Reddit or a Facebook post and said, this is how you do it. This is how you dominate everybody else. I think there's definitely some room for them to do that. Warp Coven were recently buffed, in case you forgot. They both got a buff to Ploy, which allowed their rubrics to shoot twice. And they also got a buff to their sorcerers +1 APL range. So I think Warp Coven are primed. They're not going to get another buff. Basically no chance, because they've just been buffed. And it hasn't really had an effect on them. I think Warp Coven are really solid if you can be bothered to paint their models, because they are. I mean, Zangors suck, everybody agrees on that, and then rubrics look cool sometimes, but they're not exactly easy to do. Then we get the Wormblade. Now, I'm actually a little bit surprised that Wormblade are so low. One of the really big things about Wormblade, however, is that they're pretty good on boards that are covered in a lot of light terrain. And right now, Into the Dark is all heavy, essentially. And, I mean, obviously, you have barricades. And certainly the tournament tables, both in Spain and Poland, are moving towards having more and more heavy terrain, even on open boards. So they kind of have one of their big advantages removed. The other thing there is, obviously, they have writhing ingress, which is a very interesting way to get through certain terrain obstacles, but it doesn't work on Into the Dark because you can't go through, you can't ever measure through a wall. So they've kind of had two minor nerfs. They've never received a buff. They're not played much, but there they are. Now, I will say I have only ever played as I've played as them twice. Second time I lost. The first game I won, so clearly they're OP if I can win with them. Wormblade, very interesting. Also, I will say about Wormblade, very cool team for conversion possibilities because it's just two dudes on 32mm bases and everybody else on 25mm bases, which means you can just do whatever you want. Like, that's the only theme you need to follow through with. Two dudes that are super powerful, everybody else weak. Which means you can easily do like your own little inquisitorial kill team if you fancy. Perhaps you want to use a bunch of shotgun dudes, a bunch of scions, perhaps, as your like regimental, inquisitorial guard, some Lucian Blacks or whatever you fancy. And then two inquisitors. In fact, that's actually what I've done. I started to do my own kind of imperial version of Wormblade. I was using that limited edition, Inquisitor model, as he was probably going to be a Locus, I guess. And then I took a Vindicare Assassin, who's got, the big sniper rifle. And that was going to be, obviously, the sniper. Yeah, super cool options there. Warp Coven. I don't know. Oh my god, I've gone full hobby mode. What am I doing? Warp Coven. You've got two options there. I mentioned it in my last video as well. You could either do like an Eldar thing, so your sorcerers are the Warlocks or Farses or Eldrad Ulthuan, just drop them onto a 32mm base. And then your rubrics could just be Wraithguard, but just on a 32mm base. And then if you wanted Zangors, what would they be? They'd just be regular Guardians. I mean, they're melee, so they would be the Storm Guardian Defenders, right? Boom, done. Or, sorry, you could do Howling Banshees. You could do, you get funky, do some Incubi from Drukhari, they're mercenaries. Anyway, shout out to Ryan from Command Point for this idea ages ago now, for instead of Warp Coven, War Coven. So they're all Orcs. You've got enough Psyker models from the Orcs to do 3 sorcerers. And then the beauty there is, actually, you don't even have to convert anything. Like, for the rubrics, they're just 32mm bases. They're all just 32mm bases. The rubrics would all just be shooter boys, and the Zangors would just be chopper boys. Absolutely stunner. Absolutely stunning. Anyway, that's me done, which of course brings us to the final slide. I'd like to say, if you made it to the end of the video, I'd like to give you a big triple hello. Deep breath, deep breath. Guys, the last 25 minutes have been a blur for me. I don't know anything I've just said. Please leave a comment and remind me what I've just said, and whether you enjoyed this video, whether this was a fun little exploration into my psyche, I guess. I don't know what else it would be in. Yeah, cool. Don't forget to check out the app, Kill Team Score Tracker, I think it's called. That is genuinely helpful. Like, I'm going to go play a game later today, and I'm going to just throw this down on there because it's super useful. What else am I doing? I got myself a little bit hyped on Wormblade, I'm not going to lie. I should probably go and dig out that Imperial team. I'm feeling the need for a nice little conversion project. Don't know why. I've been leaning towards Ogryns because I really want to play some Talons of the Emperor. And they're a great proxy for... These are Ogryn sprues here. That's, yep. Would it be crazy to do Genestealer Cults, a 40k army, but Loyalist? I mean, that's just Imperial Guard, right? I'll have to think about things. Anyway, these are clearly high. Please leave a comment, a like and subscribe. If you like what I'm doing here, obviously you don't like this last bit, nobody's listening anymore. Consider supporting me on Patreon, that'd be awesome. Otherwise, jump into my Discord, because that is a place where people more focused than I am can help you with the game. Anyway, guys, have a good day. Stay safe. Get enough sleep and drink enough water. Talking of drinking enough water, here is this delightful Glass Half Dead merch. You know what I need to do? I need to buy one of these stickers and put it on my tablet. Okay, see you later. Have a good day. Bye.